Today's video is going to be looking at Martin Luther King Jr. and going through the story and just kind of piecing it apart in the way that the world makes sense to me now. And that's it. I'll just share my thoughts on this character. And to tell you the gist of it, I think that all of these people are just characters. And I think that anybody who you just know their name, or they're a character in history, or they're allegedly, moving mountains in socially, anything like that, I think is pre-planned, and these characters are largely fabricated. They're probably just reading scripts that they're handed, and they're probably just an insider, somebody in the club, and they're playing a part. I think 99 times out of 100, that's what you're dealing with. Some sort of puppet on the world stage. These people very often don't have real convictions. They're always just playing a part. And where my mind goes to with this stuff is, it's just one of the ways that they create reality, mold reality, is by having all their little goons on the world stage, and they make things real by reenacting them. They pretend things are casual, but it's actually pre-planned to the T. And something that I just often think of is how people's minds, they're very good at constructing a reality where people's minds go there and they know the right things to go to. What I'm getting at is, you go in and you're listening to a Sunday service and the preacher's talking about evil. What are the chances that they mention Hitler? It's like almost guaranteed that if somebody's talking about evil, they're going to start going to Hitler, as if that's just what we're all supposed to know instinctively somehow is like the prime evil. And I personally think that Hitler was just a character played by Walt Disney. And anyways, other things too, like Mother Teresa, that's like the flip side of that. People go straight to Mother Teresa, and you'll hear pastors say the same thing. Hitler is supposed to be this prime evil that is almost only rivaled by Satan in a lot of people's minds. And I think that just has a lot to do with the J people. Anyways, the flip side of that is Mother Teresa, and they just bite hook, line, and sinker, and they think that Mother Teresa must be this amazing person. And I think that's the big issue, is that people believe the characters that are put on the world stage, and they believe everything that's ascribed to them by those in control of history. And right, history, this is something that we know, history is written by the victors. Whoever's in control is going to write history and rewrite past histories and portray whatever sort of BS they want to push. But the biggest issue that I see is people's inability to just admit that everything on the world stage is a lie, and to use real examples. Like, what is the point of this? I think that the reason that they do this is to have control over people's minds, because they control all the little references that anybody is going to relate to, is going to be one of their controlled figures. When I think that we should be using biblical truths. So when a pastor talks about prime evil, they should probably be bringing things up from the Bible, I think, and probably not talking about Hitler. But yeah, I feel a big mind game at play, and they like this tangled web of actors, and they want people's minds to live where every thought that they have is dictated in some way through them. And I think that it should just be more about real experiences, real. When you have evil, talk about evil in your own life. It's almost like, I think my very personal videos are better examples, when exposing this Bafo stuff. This is real evil, in my opinion, not just some character on the world stage. Yeah, I'm going to have a lot of rambling in this. I think I've already said a lot. I've already thought of extra things and forgotten them and saying this, so maybe they'll come back into my mind. But let's start going through the images. So, got the look. They certainly got the look, if you know what the look is that I'm talking about. Masculine women, feminine men is nothing new. And those in control are the masculine women, feminine men. The Orange 33 Club. I mean, look at this. This looks like a woman that's only been on T for like a month or something. So what's interesting, I'm just going to go through the slides and point out things that stick out to me, things that are interesting to me, that point into this bigger picture of, hey, all of this stuff is fake. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, or however you want to think of it. This is just one example of the way that these people are always operating. And it's such a huge scale. It's hard to see the forest for the trees, because it's like every one of their characters basically follows the same scripts, more or less. Okay, so I think it's interesting. I'm just going to point out anything that sticks out. King's father would regularly use whippings to discipline his children, sometimes having them whip each other. I just found the irony of black people who later would go on and become, like, free the blacks movement, is actually being whipped in their own home by their dad, and they're whipping each other. There's just a lot of irony going on there. I'm not agreeing with that. I think he probably came from an abusive home. A lot of times these bathos are really super abusive. And I guess that was kind of the point that I didn't finish. I think it's not helpful when we talk about evil and then you start pointing to these obscure historical figures like Hitler, who may or may not just be some character on the world stage. I think it's so much more helpful when we talk about real personal evil. We all face evil in our lives. And especially if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you're going to be attacked by evil. And so I just think it's a huge disservice when we go to these historical figures rather than talking about the evil that we all face in our own lives. And it's almost like it puts up this barrier, like we're not allowed to call somebody evil because they aren't like Hitler level. I'm just saying that because clearly I believe this, that MLK Jr. probably went through some horrible stuff. A lot of Baffos do. Their parents are horrible people. And I think that blacks were treated as second-class citizens. And I think that the caste system is just still very much alive today. But it's interesting because the whole segregation thing, it's interesting because you have game players who are black and you have game players who are white. You still have the levels within the communities, but then they just agree to, well, I don't know if they both agreed, but sometimes they do. Sometimes it's the blacks that want segregation the most. And you'll see that today sometimes. You'll see a lot of black people that want segregation again because they don't want to be around white people. I don't know. My thoughts on all of this stuff is I believe in tribalism. I think that what the Bible says about tribes is real, and I think that humans are instinctually tribal in nature, and that tribes should self-govern more or less, but I'm not like a xenophobe, or I don't think that race mixing is like a crazy sin. I just think that most people, most of the time, will prefer to be within their own tribe because most people are gonna be tribal. That's my opinions on this. I don't support, racially motivated. An individual should always stand for themselves, but tribalism is a real thing, and that's just my opinion on that. But every individual should be able to stand for themselves, of course. This was just something from his past. At the age of 13, he denied the bodily resurrection of Jesus. Everybody can go through times of less faith or more faith. I just wasn't sure if this ever got rectified. In the Wikipedia article, it talked about this, but then I don't know if it ever was rectified. Like, did he ever come back later and say that he did believe in the resurrection of Jesus? Because I think that's an important thing. This was some weird stuff. So, red flags. I'm just pointing out red flags. Defenestration is something that is a historical happening. It's one of the things they like to do. Defenestration, jumping out of windows, seems to be a theme in a lot of their characters. I don't know exactly what's going on there. I remember learning about this in AP European history or whatever. The defenestration of Prague, is that what it was? Anyways, there's big historical things about people being thrown out of windows. And it was multiple going out of windows for King. Even that name, I mean, I'll talk about it now. I probably shouldn't call him king. That's a blasphemous name. Jesus Christ is the king. So whenever they give these characters names like king, Elvis being the king, that's clearly trying to be blasphemous. So what this is about, I think a lot of times people just don't even look into the backstories of people, myself included. I don't know why I would have assumed that king is like just some random person, but a lot of times they don't even hide that these people are connected, and you know how birds of a feather flock together, and it takes one to know one, and everybody in Hollywood is related to one another, you know, allegedly, and all of that stuff. There is some truth to that, I believe, and nepotism runs this world. Anybody who grows up into an adult here can understand that nepotism runs this world. It's all about who you know, and fake it till you make it. So this, it just shows that King was always high society. Who can go to Morehouse College, historical black college? It looks nice, looks old world. So that's one thing to understand about MLK. Always high society. And I don't think, did any of you get sent to some boys' school growing up? I don't know, probably not. And these types existed in the black community. That's something interesting about the Victorian era, seeing the pictures of the black people that clearly lived in Americas. They didn't seem to be slaves or second-class citizens all the time, so it's like something happened at the last history reset, and the blacks in America were just demoted to slave status. I'm not sure exactly. I don't believe in the slave ships. Oh, that's all clearly BS. If you can think for yourself and understand logistics and all that. So the blacks in America were already here. That's actually a really interesting thing that I always see online, is the distinction between African blacks and American blacks, and how everybody instinctively knows that they're not the same thing. American blacks are totally different than the blacks in Africa. So one thing to point out, I'm just going to quickly go over this. This is one of those things they don't teach you in school. One of those things everybody should know about this. Just like how everybody should know that the smallpox blanket thing was something that somebody totally made up. But they like the story. They like the emotional response the smallpox blanket story gives. So they're not going to shout from the rooftops, oh yeah, this is totally made up. They just keep that quiet. Same way they keep this sort of thing quiet, where Rosa Parks was... they orchestrated the whole Rosa Parks thing, and they were copying somebody else who already did that. And this is one of those instances of they show their colors. This is their modus operandi. They love to do this, where let's say something interesting does happen. Let's say that a Baffo hears of something totally interesting that just happened. They hate it when a non-club member or someone who they think is beneath them, this CC Claudette Colvin could even be a club member, but other people didn't like her, and they say, hey, I can do that, but I can do it better. They steal her idea. They put on a production. This happens all the time, I believe, where some news event can happen, and then they put on their own version of it. They might make some of the details more extravagant for their fake version, and then they sell the story. If a real piece of news happens in your hometown, the chances that it gets put on the news, pretty slim. But they might reenact it later and have one of their goons do it and then say that story's legit. That happens a lot. It's a meme. It's a fact of life of this place where, you know, I should have included that little meme, but I didn't know I was going to go on this ramble. There's the little meme of somebody handing this other stick figure an object, and then that person grabs the object and said, I made this. It's like... You know what I'm talking about? The I made this thing? That is so common, where people steal something from somebody else and then they just start to take credit for it. That happens all the time. And guess what? When they own the media, they constantly get to say that, hey, I was the original because I was the first one to do it on the TV or whatever. So that's just something to know about Rosa Parks, that it's all a bunch of BS. The letter from jail is just screaming to me of they're trying to be like the Bible. A lot of the famous letters from the Bible were written in jail. And I don't personally believe he wrote most of his his speeches. That's just my opinion. I think they're handed speeches. Who knows if they really go to jail? They probably just go to a hotel room for a little bit. And these days, a lot of the famous people, they like to go to rehab or go to jail when they're doing something else. Who knows what they're doing? He was gross. We'll get to that in the end. And gross and not that slick. I am like Napoleon at Waterloo before your charms. He said that to some chick he was trying to get with. And then she replied, you haven't even met me. King limited Coretta's role in the civil rights movement, expecting her to be a housewife and mother. Wow, so it's going to turn out that it doesn't seem like King was that good of a person. And this happens a lot. It comes out that Mother Teresa actually was a horrible person, and then it's just a big PR stunt to, oh, look how holy I am. Well, same thing with the Martin Luther King. He's just an actor playing the role of a civil rights activist, and the movement itself is so much bigger. They need actors, and the whole hippie movement was orchestrated by the CIA. Social movements like that are bigger than the individual. He was just playing a part, and he was handed those scripts, and it doesn't seem like he was a good person, especially towards women, which is interesting considering he could even be a woman on T. PhD. But then look at this. An academic inquiry in October 1991 concluded that portions of his doctoral dissertation had been plagiarized and he had acted improperly. No thought should be given to the revocation of Dr. King's doctoral degree. It would serve no purpose. The committee found that the dissertation still makes an intelligent contribution to scholarship. A letter is now attached to the copy of King's dissertation in the university library, noting that numerous passages were included without the appropriate quotations and citations of sources. Significant debate exists on how to interpret King's plagiarism. Oh, okay. Did we learn about that in school? Why don't they teach us about that? How King plagiarized his PhD dissertation. So yeah, Rosa Parks, I'm going to skip through this. It really doesn't matter. But Rosa Parks, all you need to know, Rosa Parks, another nepotism baby. They want you to think, oh, look at these poor black people that are picking themselves up by the bootstraps. And these were already high society people. They were just black high society. And back then, the black Masonic, whatever, Bafo Club, they had their own stuff going on. It was more tribal back then. And that's one of those pendulum things. It kind of comes and goes. The tribalism of humans, whether they let the tribalism exist like that or whether they want to push the melting pot, make everybody the same brown skin color thing. It seems like one of those pendulum things that always swings back and forth. This I thought was very interesting. King's speech has been redacted from this video because of the copyright held by King's estate. Does that sound like somebody who's doing this for the cause? That they build these estates that worry about copyrights and it's about money, and that doesn't sound right. This was just some interesting thing. Rosa Parks' life is wrong. She started officially working for the NAACP in 1943. She was the secretary for E.D. Nixon, then president of the... So, I guess what this comment was getting at is they want you to think, at least in my opinion, my uneducated opinion from Rosa Parks, it just seems like this was just some black lady who decided to go against the rules one day because she was tired. That's what they want you to think. That's actually this Claudette person, in all likelihood. She's likely the one who was like, I don't want to. And then, boy... What Rosa Parks actually is just a publicity stunt. Hey, we're going to do it. It was planned. And she already was working as some sort of activist before that. So, got to get your facts straight about this. King delivered a 17-minute speech, later known as I Have a Dream, in which he departed from his prepared text, possibly at the prompting of Mahalia Jackson, who shouted behind him, "Tell him about the dream." Well, if you really think that the most famous part of his speech was... totally departed from his prepared text, I don't know what to tell you, but they love to do this. They make up some BS story, and then they make a movie about it, and they say, this movie's based off of real life. Same thing as this. They love to say, oh, this speech was totally not planned. I totally departed from my speech and I didn't intend on doing that, and that's when I said the most amazing things. They're just liars. I picked this image for the hand signs going on. Over here, this guy's pointing and doing the devil hand sign on the left, and then over here we get a magic wand holding his hand like he's holding a magic wand. Strange picture. Anyways, in on it. They're all in on it. On April 3rd. So this I'm going to skip through to paraphrase. Martin Luther King is another example of those amazing people who it's like they seem to know that they're about to die. That's something that happens in many of their characters, where it's like they'll make it clear that they know that they're about to die, and then afterwards they say, oh, isn't that crazy that it's like they knew that they were about to die. So he gave some speech. I've been to the mountaintop at the Masonic Temple. So yes, big time Freemason. Freemasons, they write history. They love nothing more than putting on a play, putting on a production. Memphis is a pretty important place. So this starts to get around his death, I think. Around his assassination, some numerology stuff starts to appear. Put on your gematria tin hats. March 29th, that's a 32. Because March 3, 29, so 3 plus 29 is 32. 32 obviously is very close to the number 33. It's like the penultimate. We're about to go to 33. You see 32 a lot, almost as often as 33. And yeah, a lot of times it can mean something's like about to, because it's going on. It reminds me of a lot of times you'll see like 665 pop out of nowhere. And the joke, I think, is that it's like, it's one away from being 666. Anyways, in support of the black sanitation workers who were represented by the whatever, local 1733. So there's a 33. Okay. Sounds like standard stuff. Operation Breadbasket. This just gets into your social movements are actually Operation whatever by the CIA. And there's just more, oh, it's almost like he knew that he was about to be assassinated. And ever noticed all the strange circumstances around there? It's like they'll always know who the last person was who spoke to them. They'll know the exact last words. A lot of times real life just doesn't work like that. You'll kind of more or less know what people said, or you'll have a sentiment of what they said, or details are often a lot more fuzzy in real life than when they pull out 1,000 cutesy little details about a moment that should be intimate. And it almost seemed like there were like 20 people around interacting with King right around his death. 20 like big hitters, 20 like famous people. King's exact words. It's like they know for exact what his last words were, because it was planned ahead of time, and then they just retire the character. They know down to the minute when these people were shot. It's just all a lot to take in. April 4th is a 44, which is numerically important as a destruction number. You can go look into this stuff. I don't dive very deep into numerology and gematria and all that, because there's so much that people try to overcomplicate it, make it seem more complicated than it is, or more mystifying than it is. But there really is something to the number 44 being linked with destruction. And so it's not surprising to me to see April 4th pop up around his death. And the balcony. So what do you know? We have Lincoln, who we associate with freeing the slaves, being shot on a balcony. And now we have MLK Jr. being shot on a balcony. What are the chances of that? Well, if you're writing the story, it's very easy to make stuff like that happen. If life is just lifing, and naturally, the chances of something like that occurring are like zero. And you know the expression, you can't make this stuff up. That's double think, backwards talk. When somebody says you can't make this up, what they mean is this is so unlikely to happen in just natural circumstances that in all likelihood this was made up. So that's what that expression means. If you've ever wondered why, like, you can't make this stuff up, it actually means this probably was made up in all likelihood. Okay. The bullet entered through his right cheek, smashing his jaw, then traveled down his spinal cord before lodging in his shoulder. Okay, they know the minute that he died. He had a heart of a 60-year-old. That's kind of an interesting little tidbit. 21 years older. My mind went to hormone abuse can mess with people's hearts sometimes. I don't know. So this was really interesting about the murder of... I think that this is a clear-cut case of somebody was framed for the fake murder of MLK Jr. I think that the character was probably retired. They came up with this plot, we're going to kill you like Lincoln was killed. Lincoln also was probably not really assassinated, right? Killed by an actor, allegedly. So this, I think, is a clear-cut case of they took some guy who probably was a psychopath. It sounds like this Ray guy was kind of a troublemaker, and they frame him with the fake murder so that they have somebody to put up there. So he confessed on March 10th, although he recanted this confession 3 days later. On the advice of his attorney, he pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 99 years. Later, he claimed that somebody named Raoul was involved, and it was a conspiracy. He spent the remainder of his life attempting to withdraw his guilty plea. So that's something that I'm surprised they don't teach that in school. Hey, did you know that the person that they framed for, or, you know, the person who allegedly killed MLK Jr., he confessed to the murder, but then he started taking back his confession and continued to try to take back his confession. That does sound consistent with somebody who's framed and was forced to make a false confession to me. So why wasn't this looked into more? It's interesting. Ray's lawyers maintained he was a scapegoat, similar to the way that Lee Harvey Oswald is seen as a scapegoat. I think that is true, that they'll take the scummy, honestly. So you know what this reminds me of? There's a lot of shill YouTube channels, especially in the truth community, that push like Ball Earth and stuff, that they look like they're straight out of prison. They look so slimy, like weaselly and seedy individuals. I have many ideas on the top of my head that I could put out there of people that I believe to be YouTube shills, misinformation agents that are protecting the status quo, that they look like criminals. And this isn't a topic I look into very much, but gang stalking and all that, the government hires seedy individuals to do things, to do bad things. And so, yeah, I think that they have, what is it, the fall guy? Is that, they have people who can take the hit, who can take all the heat for their bad deeds. They admitted that Ray was a thief and a burglar, but he had no record of committing violent crimes. This just sounds like some petty thief. He would have no reason to murder MLK, or how would he know that he's out there on the balcony? I mean, they talk later about the room. Blah, blah, blah. I don't care about that stuff. Okay, so this, I don't even know. It wasn't even a racist thing. Oh, so this shows you, I know why I picked this. Sometimes there's stories like this. The people who know the game, who are in on it, who know that this stuff is a bunch of BS, they all want a piece of that pie. They know that certain events are fabricated and that they can always retcon, they can always come up with new theories and new ideas for old stories. So a lot of times people try to get a piece of that pie and get in on the action, who are fringe, and it's kind of up to the system to pick up their story or not. And so that's what I think of when I see stuff like this. In 2002, some random church minister claimed his father assassinated King. It's just some baffo who's like, the story on Martin Luther King Jr.'s death is kind of bad, so I'm just going to come up with my own. That's what I think it is. It's just game players who know that this stuff is all fake, and they're just taking the off chance that somebody who has power to write history is like, okay, let's go ahead and say that. Sure, this other guy killed him. You know, sometimes stories like that get picked up every once in a while. There's a book published, I guess, about this. There is no way a 10-cent white boy could develop a plan to kill $1 million black man. Jesse Jackson. I think Jesse Jackson was supposed to be there around the death. So this is really interesting. this is a strange piece of evidence that was allegedly sent to King that's like threatening him of exposure. But look at the numerology that's going on here. They'll know you're an evil beast. You're done, King. There was only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days in which to do. This exact number has been selected for a specific reason. It has definite practical significance. So King is involved with some shady people who seem to be blackmailing him or threatening him, talking about numerology and the importance of the number 34. That's very interesting. Look at this. I'll just read a little bit of this. In view of your low grade, abnormal personal behavior, I will not dignify your name with either a Mr. or a Reverend or Doctor. Yeah, be very skeptical of people who collect titles on this earth. It's usually meaningless. And your last name calls to mind only the type of king, such as King Henry VIII, and his countless acts of adultery and immoral conduct lower than that of a beast. In May 2019, an FBI file emerged on which a handwritten note alleged that King looked on, laughed, and offered advice as one of his friends raped a woman. Wow, this is right around the time of all that Pizzagate stuff, too. That's interesting. Bill Cosby, rapist. And yeah, it turns out that the goons on the world stage oftentimes are rapists. And so this isn't surprising to me, but history, the mainstream history people are going to defend people like King because they need, it's an idol for them. King is an idol for most historical people. They really do idolize these people on the world stage and put them on pedestals above people. I've always felt that. Something about me has always felt how weird it was that people refuse to accept that at the end of the day, everybody is human and nobody's on a higher level than anybody else. That's just something I've felt true since I was born, that even if someone's famous, that doesn't matter. It really makes zero difference. They're still a human. They're still an individual. They're not on a higher level than anyone else just because they're an actor or an actress or some famous person. And the opposite of that really is idolatry, when you start putting these people on pedestals. And Satan loves to put up false idols. He loves to find the dirtiest, grossest, most immoral people and have them on the world stage as some sort of saint. Satan loves that. So I don't know, but I guess there's some 1989 autobiography where somebody mentioned that King was not a good person, especially not to women. This was an interesting tidbit. I think this is like the last little thing for this video. I'm just going to read it because it just raises questions. A fire station was located across from the Lorraine Motel next to the boarding house in which James Earl Ray was staying. Police officers were stationed in the fire station to keep King under surveillance. Agents were watching King at the time he was shot. Immediately following the shooting, officers rushed towards the motel. Merrill McWhatever, an undercover police officer, was the first person to administer first aid to King. The antagonism between King and the FBI, the lack of an all-points bulletin to find the killer, and the police presence nearby led to suspicion that the FBI was involved in the assassination. Yeah, I mean, it probably was a planned fake assassination, so they probably were involved in that, I would imagine. All the world's a stage. Hope you enjoyed this video. God bless everyone.